welcome to Algebra 1, Lesson 1, but this is actually, I think, your 5th day in Algebra 1. Okay, so we're out of review, but we're not out of review. Most of the things in this lesson are going to be reviewed. There might be some concepts that are slightly new, slightly different, but basically everything is review. Okay, so we're going to start off with just some basic terms. This really is probably going to be the most new thing that you see right here. So we use the words number and numeral. Number and numeral. Numbers are really just an idea. For example, if I have these 3 markers, that's the idea that there's 1, 2, 3. 3 of them. That's the number, the quantity that I have. But if I want to represent that number, the number 3, I use a symbol. So that is a numeral. So our number is the idea of the quantity, and then the symbol is the numeral. But usually in math, we just refer to the symbol as our number. So that's just a little something for you to be aware of. Okay. We can put our numbers into groups, which we're going to look even more at in our next lesson. But we can put our numbers into groups, and the most basic group are your natural numbers, also known as counting numbers. So natural numbers or counting numbers. They could be referred to in either way. They are just your numbers that you count, starting at 1, not at 0, starting at 1, because you can't count 0 things, right? So starting at 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, so on and so forth. So this little dot, dot, dot here just shows you can't see that very well in the video. Color that in here. Okay, so that just shows you that it continues onward, keeps going into infinity. There's another group. That would be the real numbers, your real numbers. Real numbers are basically that they're just numbers that show a distance from 0. Okay, any number that can show a distance from 0. So in your natural numbers, your counting numbers, notice we didn't have any fractions, we didn't have any negative numbers, because we don't really use those for counting. They're not whole numbers. So our natural or counting numbers don't include fractions, they don't include 0, they don't include negative numbers. But real numbers that are just talking about a distance from a point, yes, those ones do include fractions, negative numbers, even 0, because you can be 0 from 0. That is actually a distance. So these represent real numbers. 3.5, because you can be 3.5 units from 0. 0, because you can be right at 0. 0.2, negative 11, 3/4, 5. Any of those would be real numbers. Now, we often use number lines for counting and for really for a lot of things. For counting, for converting, we've used number lines. For adding and subtracting with positives and negatives, we use number lines. So it's a very useful tool. To draw a number line, you draw a straight line. You put tick marks that are going to designate your numbers. You try to keep them as much of an equal distance from each other as possible. And I put arrows on the end of my number line. You don't have to, because a number line is just automatically assumed that it continues in both directions. I just like to put arrows on the end of mine because I feel like it makes it more complete. If you don't, perfectly fine. So wherever you have 0, that's your origin. All the numbers to the right of 0 are positive. All the numbers to the left of 0 are negative. We can use a number line to determine which number is bigger than another. Because if you're one number, so let's say I'm going to plot 2 and negative 2. Okay? If I want to know which one is bigger, well, whichever one is to the right is the bigger number, 2. If I want to look at negative 2 and negative 1, well, negative 1 is to the right of negative 2, so negative 1 is bigger. Now, when I put these dots on there, I would say that I graphed my numbers. I graphed 2 and negative 2. Every number has an opposite. The opposite just refers to changing the sign. So the opposite of 2 is negative 2. The opposite of negative 2 is 2. The opposite of -4, +4. The opposite of +4, -4. So the opposite just refers to flipping your sign. Okay? We use signs in order to show our operations in math. So we use the equal sign to show that something is equal. So on this side, 5 plus 2. On this side, 7. 5 plus 2 is the same as 7. So 5 plus 2 equals 7. But down here, 5 plus 2, that is not the same as 11. So we have our equal sign, but we draw a line through it. So it does not equal 11. 5 plus 2 does not equal 11, and that's how we would say it. Okay, so now we're going to review, excuse me while I bend out of camera. Okay, now we're going to review our terms for problems, just our basic types of problems. When you are doing these mathematical operations, these 4 operations, multiplication, addition, subtraction, and division, are universal. So they are for mathematics, they are for algebra, they are basic building blocks of math. What do we call these terms? It's important to know because that helps you with solving your word problems. It helps you to know what you're looking for by knowing these terms. So the numbers that you add together are called your add-ins. That's right. And your answer is the sum. Very good. So your add-ins and your sum. Okay, how about subtraction? What do we call the top? Minuend, for those of you who forgot. Subtrahend, and the answer is this is the one you should hopefully remember, difference. Okay, if you remember them all, give yourself a pat on the back. If not, well, here you go. Minuend, subtrahend, difference. Okay, multiplication. The numbers that you multiply together, those are called your factors. Your final answer is the product. If you have multiple digits that you're multiplying together, you have these numbers that you have to add, and those are your partial products. Very good. So factor, factor, partial product if necessary, and your final answer is always the product. And lastly, division. Divisor on the outside, quotient is your answer, dividend on the inside.